When it comes to raised beds, you've got a number of choices as to the material you use. I went with concrete blocks. If I'd gone with lumber, when I built this 14 years ago, I would have had to have replaced it twice by now. I have to deal with subterranean termites, plus because it's damp all the time, it would have rotted. Had I gone with galvanized steel, that would have rusted out in places. Plus, I wouldn't have got something as large as this. The concrete blocks will last a lifetime. There's a few attributes about them that are negative. I'll tell you how I resolve those. Some of the positive attributes: they weigh about 35 pounds, which is light enough for me to carry around. They measure 16 inches long by 8 by 8. There is a thicker side and a thinner side. So when you stack them, you want to stack them with the thicker side down. They are very porous. They wick moisture away from your soil. I've got a fix for that. About 10 years ago, I reconfigured this raised bed. I wanted to redesign my garden, so I moved the blocks around a bit. These are very easy if you decide to change things up. They're simple to take apart and put back together. About 7 years ago, I added kiddie pools, but that's a story for another day. One of the main issues that I found was when you stack them too high, they start to become unstable, and I've resolved that. This area here, I have a footing that goes underneath the front wall here. This wall hasn't shifted, but the other walls where I just stacked them on soil, because they don't have much of a base to them, you start adding weight to it. So you put two of these stacked too high, so that's 35 pounds. Another one on top will make it 70 pounds. So if you do, say, a raised bed that's maybe 4 foot by 4 foot, well, 4 foot would take 10 blocks. So you're going to have 350 pounds. You double that up, you're going to have 700 pounds. And within a short period of time, you've got something that's considerably heavy. And it's only going to rest on such a small space. So I figured that out. I figured out the leaching of the water through the concrete. And what I'll do now is I'll walk you over. I've got another raised bed that I've got set up in the back that I've had set up for about 2 years. I'll go down and I'll show you what that one looks like, and I'll go over the details on how I put these raised beds together. This is one of my oldest raised beds. I built it along this wall. This was the south facing wall, the sunniest part of my garden. I put in a chain link fence, and then behind it, or this side of it, I added some clay bricks. This started off at 2 rows high. Over time, it's sunk into the ground. Actually, what I first did when I started my garden here, this was leveled out and it was leveled down to bedrock. The previous owner, or a previous owner, was going to do something here, but he never completed it. And what I was left with was a level area that was mostly shale rock bedrock with some clay on it. So in order to grow anything here, I had to go with raised beds. So I chose concrete blocks to build them. This wall along here is built straight on the shale. This is 14 years old. I haven't had to alter it in any way. The only difference was some of the plants that I used to grow here I had to move out, and now I've got my dragon fruit hedge along here. Clay bricks are a better conductor of heat, so what I did, I got some used clay bricks, ran them along the back wall, which is the sun side of my garden. During the day these heat up and slowly release the heat overnight. Anytime you put in a raised bed, because it's elevated above the ground, it's going to dry out faster and it's going to need more frequent watering. I've grown a number of things along here. Right now in these blocks I've got society garlic. Society garlic does really well. In these conditions, any sort of onion type family plant seems to do well. Robbie used to grow a lot of things in the front garden in the concrete blocks. 7 years ago she posted a video. There's a link in the description. Now she's got geraniums growing there. In this bed here I've lined the cells and I've planted red vein sorrel in these blocks. I only harvest a leaf or two at a time. I don't make a full meal out of something that I've got growing in these blocks, but I think they look nice and I've got something edible. Over time, I've brought in a little bit more clay soil and I've added a lot of wood chips. So this is a row 2 blocks high, and I haven't had to do anything with it. This is permanent. I don't have to worry about that again. The new raised beds that I've built, like this one, I've set up a little differently. So what I think I'll do now is I'll move down here and I'll talk about this raised bed. Two years ago I built this raised bed. It hasn't shifted. I put a footing down. I didn't pour a concrete footing. I wanted it to be mobile still, so if I want to change things up I can move it around. I could have used these concrete cap blocks. They're about $2 a piece and they sit nicely across the top of the concrete blocks. Instead I went with pavers. So these were around $2 and these were about $1.68 I think. So these are less money, but I needed more of them. If I'd gone with the top caps, I would have needed 20. I needed 48 of these. So these were more money because I had to get more of them. But what they're going to do is stabilize the wall better, because I've got a larger surface area and that'll stop it from wobbling side to side. I did some filming as I was doing this, and I put all the clips together so I could show you the steps that I took to make this raised bed. To start the project off, I cleared the area and I started to get my materials together. I rough stacked the concrete blocks roughly where I wanted them to go. The length of the bed is 21 foot 6, which is based on a 20-foot length of rebar that I used for the trellis. The width is 39 inches, making it easy to reach across. The blocks actually measure 15 5/8 by 7 5/8. When used in construction, this allows for a 3/8 layer of mortar between the blocks. For this project, I used 72 blocks. Many of them were salvaged from other projects that I'd done around the property. We're on a hillside, so I used them for soil retention walls and steps. I also used 48 1-foot square paving stones. To make sure the blocks sat in the centre of the pavers, I calculated where the outside edge should be and set up 2 parallel string lines. Unfortunately, I've misplaced the footage of me laying them down. To get the pavers flat and level, I used a square masonry tool to move the soil. This took time but was really important. Having a flat level footing made it faster and easier to lay down the blocks. Because there's a mismatch in size between the pavers and blocks, two of the pavers stick out at either end. They were hidden once I backfilled it with wood chips. To begin stacking, I added 4 blocks to one end. Because I was sitting them on a flat level surface, I didn't need to check them for level. The next step was to mark out a chalk line. I used one of the blocks to hold the end in place. Then I reeled it out and snapped a line. I only did this on one side. In hindsight, had I thought about it, if I'd done it on both sides, it would have made things a bit easier. Laying out the first row of blocks was pretty straightforward. When I moved them out of the way to lay down the pavers, I simply stacked them within arm's reach so that I could easily grab them without having to move around too much. I butted them up against each other close to the string line. At this point it didn't have to be perfect. Once I had them all laid out, I came along and I kicked them in position using the string line as a guide. Because I hadn't laid a chalk line, finishing up the first row took a little longer. I had to measure and adjust the blocks as I went along. I bought some of these concrete blocks over 20 years ago. They're also called concrete masonry units, or CMUs. Some people still use the term cinder blocks, but these are concrete. They're simply made from sand, cement and water. I wouldn't use old recycled cinder blocks even if I could find them. They contain heavy metals and toxic material. From what I understand, they look different. They were made from a finer material and poured. Concrete blocks are more porous and they were pressed in a mould. I placed all of my previous used blocks in the bottom row. I had a lot of new ones, so I figured I'd put those on the top. It might look better for a while. Installing the top row went fairly quickly. All I had to do was simply stack them on top of the bottom row. Before I started, I measured corner to corner on the bottom row just to make sure everything was square. When buying new blocks, I prefer to go to the store and pick them out myself. They are a little brittle, and if you pick them yourself, you can avoid getting the chipped ones. That's fine for me, I have a truck. If you don't have a truck, you could always bring a few home at a time. If you had quantity that you need, you could always have them delivered. Just keep in mind, some may arrive chipped or broken, and you might have to return a couple. To prevent gophers and moles from entering my raised beds, on the bottom I put some wire mesh. The wire mesh that I used I got from a scrap dealer. It's a lot more heavy duty than this. This is 1/2 by 1 inch and this will do the job. You can buy this by the roll at feed stores, farm stores and online. It's going to be long lasting. How long it will last will depend on your soil type and the soil conditions. If you've got more alkaline soil, it'll last longer. If you've got acidic soil, it will eat away at the galvanizing. I used it on my dragon fruit bed so that my dragon fruit will establish their roots. I haven't really had much of an issue with gophers with my dragon fruit, but a lot of my other plants like my bananas and that sort of thing, the gophers really do a number on them. With the wire in place, it was time to start filling the bed. I covered the wire with a thin layer of wood chips that I got from the walkway. Then I started adding my soil mix. The soil that I used to fill this bed is a mix of materials that we have on our property. When they levelled this area, they bulldozed all the good topsoil down the hill just behind my garden. It's close by and I used that as a base for most of my soil mixes. It's very loamy, meaning it contains clay and silt, and it's very free draining. What it doesn't have is a lot of organic matter. So to improve its water holding capacity, I mixed 2 parts soil to 1 part broken down wood chips. To do that, I used my sifting trommel with a 1/2 by 1 inch screen, and this removed small rocks, glass, and anything larger that I didn't want to put in the bed. It also mixed the wood chips into the soil. The wood chips that I used were from a pile that I'd been composting for over 6 months. It was past the heating stage and it was already rich in humus. I don't mix fresh wood chips in with the soil. The microbes that break them down will compete with the plants for nitrogen. If I use fresh wood chips, they either go on the very bottom or top of a raised bed, away from the main root zone. When I mixed this batch, it was a little too dry. I prefer it much wetter. I want it moist, not too wet, not too dry. And whether I'm mixing soil or compost, I wear a face mask, either an N95 or KN95, to help catch the airborne dust and mould spores. When the wheelbarrow is almost empty, I lean it against the blocks and tip the rest of it out. The blocks are heavy enough that they rarely move, and if they do move a little, I can easily just move them back into place. At first, I bring just enough soil to level it out above the concrete pavers. The next step was to line the walls and finish filling the centre. The black plastic sheeting that I use for lining the beds is 6mm. It's extra heavy duty. I buy it in 10 by 25 foot rolls. You can get larger rolls if you need it. I get it from Home Depot or Lowe's or any general hardware store. It's used for construction. They also use it for strawberry fields. If you took 1 inch, divided it by 1,000, you would end up with 1mm. So this means it's 6 1/1000ths of an inch. It's very easy to cut. You just need a simple pair of regular scissors. I like using this sheeting because when you open it up, you'll find that the folds are 8 inches wide, which is the depth of a concrete block. To cut the sheeting, I draped it over the blocks until the side touched the bottom. Then I made some adjustments to line it up. Then I made a starter cut and clamped it to the blocks. Once it was secure, I took the scissors and I zipped along the top, roughly following the fold line. It didn't have to be perfect. Then I clamped the other end and shoveled soil against it to hold it in place. I didn't have enough clamps, so I also used wooden stakes to lean against the top of the sheeting. Once I was done, they were easy enough to slide out of the soft soil. This is how I line the cells with the black plastic sheeting. Again, I'm using 6mm heavy duty black plastic sheeting. I measure the size of the cells, so they're 6 by 5, so that's 22 inches. So I need a length at least 22, so I'll make it maybe 24. So there's about 24. We use a straight edge so I get my cuts fairly straight. And just use a pair of scissors. Run it across like that. And the sheets should just slide straight in. Each one of these folds is 8 inches. So that's 8 inches. I need 2 folds, which will get me to the bottom. And it's just a matter of following the fold line. Just roll it up. Drop it into the bottom and open it out. And load the soil in. Just get enough in the bottom so that it's pinned in place. And I can pour the rest in. Just pack it in as I go, make sure it gets into the corners. I'll leave about an inch from the top, so when I water it, it will soak in. And that's it. So let's talk about whether concrete heats the soil up too much. Concrete transfers hot and cold much more efficiently than wood. Wood is more of an insulator, but metal will heat up a lot faster than concrete. So if I had a metal raised bed, this would be up against the soil and that would heat up the soil pretty quickly. I've got 8 inches here. I've put soil in the cells. If I touch the face, it's fairly warm right now, but it will get hot later. If I touch the soil on the inside in the afternoon, that's going to get hot there, just inside the cell. But inches away, in the main part of my bed, that will remain cool. So this is acting as an insulator. There's positives and negatives regarding concrete heating up the raised bed. As I mentioned before, because the raised bed is above the ground, it's going to heat up and cool down much faster than the ground itself. If you're in a climate where your ground freezes, the advantage of having a raised concrete block bed, this will thaw out much faster because you've got air circulating around all the sides. If you live in a hot climate, you may want to do other things to a raised bed. I'm lining mine, and that's reducing any wicking. But I would cover the raised bed itself with a mulch. Some of my raised beds I've covered with wood chips. I prefer to use broken down wood chips. Usually I get from my walkways, and that reduces evaporation. So the water has only one way to go down in this bed. If this was covered in a mulch layer, couldn't go out the sides, and that'll get to the root zone. The heat from the sun is only going to affect the first couple of inches of the soil here. Here's what this raised bed looks like after being set up for 2 years. I set it up mainly for dragon fruit, but I've got a few other things growing here. The edibles that I grow here are self-seeding, so I've got purslane, of course, that comes up everywhere. Keep in mind it's summer and it is a little sparse. I've also got some rocket or arugula that continues to self-seed. I have a lot more growing in the cells right now. I've got purslane, which has gone to seed, so that's going to come up everywhere. I've also got sow thistle that I leave for the goldfinches. I've got California poppies. They've been growing here for a couple of years. They're perennials. I've also got some rue that I planted that a couple of years ago. It's got a decent trunk on it. Got more sow thistle, and I've got Chinese forget-me-nots. Goldfinches love the seeding heads of sow thistle. Got quite a few poppies. As they come up from seed, I tend to put those in the cells. On the end here I've got red vein sorrel. My garden is a foraging garden, so I just grab a leaf here and there. I have cap blocks that I place on top for setting. I can move those around. Sometimes if there's a dragon fruit variety I want to propagate, I can just trim them and quickly put them in the cells. Once the roots are started, I can move them later. For those of you that might have skipped through the video, I'll do a quick recap on what I covered. So I talked about using the concrete pavers to stabilise the wall. I mentioned using the top caps to create seeding areas. I used black plastic sheeting to line the raised bed so water won't wick out. I also talked about heat gain and loss on the concrete. If you like this video and got something out of it, please give it a like. If you'd like to leave a comment, feel free to leave a comment. I go through comments on videos and I get a lot of useful information out of that, and we'll try to respond if we can. With that, thanks for watching, and don't forget to eat what you grow. Goodbye.